Hello, welcome to NC Exclusive. My name is Felicity Ezewuike. My guest is a two-term governor of Cross River State in southern Nigeria. Whenever Calabar, modern Calabar, is mentioned, or Cross River State in general, his name pops up for very evident reasons. Twice, he has tested the waters, aspiring for the highest office in the land, the presidency. His Excellency, Donald Duke, joins me for an NC exclusive conversation. Thank you very much for giving us your time, sir.
Thank you.
Let's begin with current events in the country, specifically the inauguration of the new administration. What's your candid view of the exercise itself, considering all the contrary permutations?
The odds were in favor of the APC to win. Even though they were running on the back of a very dismal performance by the previous administration, but they had the leverage of incumbency and governance. Also, you had a very split opposition. The opposition split into 3.5. An NPP, Labour, and 5 dissenting governors, of which I sympathized with. If you put the votes of the opposition together, right, it's almost 60 or over 60%. And so you have an administration. It didn't win a popular vote, but it conformed with the constitution of the country, and that's what matters. Then secondly, INEC muddied the waters terribly, not keeping to the sanctity of what they said they would do. Besides, the elections, even though I think mirrored largely what may have occurred on the day of the elections, were very tardy in its operations. You know, you did mention that I'd run twice. In 2018, I ran. I was on the ballot. I didn't run because I never campaigned. I was mired up in court, right up to the Supreme Court, so I didn't think I stood a chance. But I formed an opinion about Yakubu, right? This is a guy that postponed elections 4 hours to voting. And his excuse was harmattan and bad roads. I mean, we're Nigerian enough to know that between the months of December and February, or November and February, there's harmattan. So it's a lame excuse. We know the state of infrastructure. I think it was severely compromised in that election. But worse still, when you postpone an election 4 hours to voting, there are reasons for that. The reason being this: 24, 48 hours to voting, all the agents have been mobilized, right? So you're not gonna, if you postpone the election, you've got to remobilize them. It takes a phenomenal amount of money to do that. Yakubu knew this and did it. The only party that will recover from that is a party in government, right? So I think he was tainted, and I think he had no moral qualms to supervise another election. And this is what has led to the various court processes. Most of all the parties that have gone to court have hinged it on the tardiness of the elections, right? Not sticking to what you said, the electronic voting and this and that. But like I said, the odds were in favor of APC because the opposition didn't get their act together. They split and they split just before the elections, right? When they needed to come together most, that's when they split.
Okay. I would still pick your thoughts on
Please.
the Labour Party and PDP and opposition generally, but let's look at the elephant in the room, the presentation of the fuel subsidy removal at the inauguration speech. At the moment, there are queues everywhere in the country. His media team has come up with a statement saying that there was no need for panic or rushed buying because the president was only aligning to status quo. There is no provision in the budget for the subsidy removal after June, end of June. So my question is, as an experienced politician, first off, what is your impression of the presentation of the fuel subsidy removal, even though a lot of people expected it? And secondly, what permutations do you have as to how this administration will run based off the inaugural speech, including the subsidy removal?
One of the planks of campaign for Bola Tinubu was the removal of subsidy. It was something that was going to happen. I mean, all the major parties or candidates, Labour, NNPP, PDP, they all said they were going to remove subsidy because it's not sustainable. And there's a twin evil in the room. As long as you're importing petrol or products and you don't manage your exchange rate, right, the subsidy balloons. So you've got to manage the exchange rate to an affordable amount, and the corollary there is that you now have a more affordable product. But going beyond that, and then this is the thrust of your question, he gave a broad outlook of what he was going to do. I think he went beyond script when he said something to the fact that subsidies no more, right? He would have, I think, stayed to script that I'm going to do this. Now, the media team saying that, oh, there was no need for panic buying, I think that's a naive statement. There's panic everywhere in Nigeria. We're all on our nerves, okay? So people buy it. I mean, as long as the product is, after a while, it will ease off. You'll find that they can get the product and all.
So let me interject and ask that. There's something, the exact statement they used was, he was merely communicating the status quo. And that's what inspired the part of my question. Does that give you an inkling as to how this administration will run after you've addressed the issue?
What's the status quo? The status quo says that the subsidy is till the end of June, yes, right? We're not at the end of June. So it would have just been a policy statement, we're going to go this way. But I think that sentence where he emphatically said, it's over, that's what got people to rush to the petrol stations. Now, how do I think he would run? I think he's decided to take all the hard decisions early on in the administration. Whatever goodwill he has, I'm going to spend it on this. Now, so he takes the critical things. You take the exchange rate, right? Multiple exchange rates. Let me deal with that and have a unified one, which is a brilliant decision, because if you do, look, most people get their foreign exchange from the black market or from the parallel market, okay? So what's going to happen is that it's going to drop, right? You find some average between both. Secondly, and good for him, I hope the local refining capacity will go up with the facility that Dangote has put up. But he's taking the tough decisions now. He's taking that of fuel, which most governments, in Obasanjo's, towards the conclusion of his administration, he took off subsidy. But there was a backlash and Yaradua put it back on. And Jonathan tried to take it off. The same thing happened. Buhari didn't even attempt, even though he said he didn't believe there was any subsidy, didn't attempt to even tackle the issue and kept on throwing it up, throwing it back until he said it will be dealt with after he leaves. So you're going to have a gutsy administration, one that is not scared to take decisions, one that would, I think, do what is right for all. What will that pertain for us? We have had a long honeymoon period in this country. We've been indulged so much, right? There's subsidy in education, there's subsidy in power, there's subsidy in petroleum. We're just a subsidized people, but all this subsidy has boomeranged against us. We're not able to grow because we're bogged down by it. And I think he wants to lift up all that. I mean, I'll give you an example of subsidy in education. To study medicine in the public universities, it costs, let me take University of Calabar where I'm comfortable with because I'm chairman of the endowment fund. It's 45,000 naira a year for tuition. So with 6 years, you're going to be paying about 200 and something thousand naira, and you become a doctor. Then you look how your next thing is you want to report and go to another country to practice. It's so ridiculous. There are folks who go to Ghana next door and pay $10,000 per annum for medicine. Now, yes, we've been impoverished by all this because this subsidy has held the country back from growing. Nigeria should be growing at about 7% per annum minimum, between 7 and 10%. But we're hovering around 1 and 2%, right? And it's all the subsidy that prevents us from having the funding to invest in infrastructure that would support growth. If we had the requisite amount of money, probably we would have taken care of the power issue, the power conundrum, the infrastructure, the roads. It used to take, on the average, 6 to 8 hours from Lagos to Calabar. Today it will take you almost 24 hours. The roads are bad. Between Calabar and Uyo, it was a 45 minutes journey. Today, if it rains, it can take you 12 hours. If it doesn't rain, maybe 3 hours. So it's crazy. So we're going to have to bite the bullet, and it's going to be a very bitter one. The pill we're going to take, maybe for the next 4 or 5 years, will be tough, okay? But it's for the betterment of everyone. It's like having malaria and you have to take Nivaqueen.
Yes, I remember. A lot of Nigerians will, react on social media. That's their flow for expression. But let me take two things that you mentioned. The first, you said on the side about Dangote refinery coming on stream. It was launched just before Buhari left office. Do you think the immediacy of the removal of the subsidy has any bearing with the launch of this refinery?
I wouldn't think so, because it was on the lips of everyone that subsidy had to go. And certainly petrol from a private refinery will not be subsidized, at least by the owners of the refinery. And that's another bitter pill that we've got to take. Listen, we have 3 refineries. We have Warri, we have Port Harcourt, we have Kaduna. They're over 30 years old. They could have been mothballed. But the good thing is that the infrastructure, if you look at the Dangote refinery, probably half of the amount spent was not on the refinery, it was providing infrastructure for the refinery. But here you have 3 refineries already, right? Even if you mothball all of them, you have the infrastructure. And with a fraction of the amount, you would have set up brand new refineries. We're paying the price for maladministration. We've gone through, each government you think will get it better. And it just gets worse. I couldn't think that we'll be this low in terms of governance capacity. But, you think, okay, in 2015 we had hit rock bottom. Then someone comes in and says, no, we have a basement, right? We're going into the basement now. I hope this would stop with this administration. And from what he has said in his policy statement and the urgency they seem to want to get things done, it's going to be an interesting but rough ride, but deservedly too. We need to change the course in which we're
I would want to stay with the fuel subsidy and removal and issues around it. But there's something you said I'd like you to speak quickly on before we come back to it, and that's the monies being paid for the education of doctors. It is an issue currently. Some doctors are saying that I don't know if that bill has been removed from the House.
The one that says that you've got to spend 5 years.
Yeah, so I could sense that you sort of align to that you spend that amount of money.
Don't sense, I'll tell you point blank. Okay. Listen, if I'm going to spend 45,000, if you're going to pay only 45,000 to a year to be a doctor, then you owe the society a lot more than 5 years. I would even put 10 years, right? Truth is, you're not going to get the best. These guys go through pretty good training for them to be admitted in the best hospitals in the world, okay? So the training is not that bad. I think it's a bit, because I'm looking into it seriously, I think it's a bit outdated. We had someone who came here to observe surgery in a teaching hospital and said we were still applying the 60s method of surgery. But that's not the point. The point is that we need to find a way of funding, particularly tertiary education, because it costs, it's not just the payment of the teachers, but for instance, they don't have the equipment. They're not tutored with modern teaching methods. For instance, in the times past, they needed cadaver for surgery and all that to train, on anatomy.
Let me
But
interject.
today, they don't use cadaver any longer. They use mannequins to do most of that, and they don't have it.
Okay, but you talking about what it costs to train these young people, and then they come out of training. We have National Association of Resident Doctors going on strike, demanding allowances, and this has continued over time. If you were a medical student, for instance, you're coming out of the university system and you see that there's every possibility you might not get paid or you'll be owed salaries, and then the conditions under which you're going to work doesn't seem welcoming and encouraging for you to grow.
Can I be dispassionate here?
Please be.
I sympathize with them. And they are in a life-saving profession. But they got educated almost free, right? They got educated almost free. So you're trying to balance how much did you pay for this, your education, that, and all that. My point is this. In some societies, right, you take a loan, so after you pay. We need to fashion a system that allows, you can't dig one hole to fill another. You can't deprive universities of adequate funding, right, just because you want to be egalitarian. You've got to find a way behind, both. So, in my time, we had bursaries, we had scholarships, and you had to pay something more. You don't hear that any longer. You don't hear the bursary, you don't hear scholarships and all that. So you've got to do that. That's one part of it. The other part, because we have not allowed our country grow the way it ought to grow and contain the inflationary trends and all that, salaries are inadequate. I mean, minimum wage is 30,000. That's nothing in today's Nigeria. We should have allowed that grow alongside with the inflation index. But the economy in real terms have not grown. And I'll explain it to you. Between 1979 and 83, the government of Shagari, he spent an average 25 billion as federal budget. The national budget was on the average 25 billion. So his 4 years there, he spent 100 billion. The population was 80 million. Today, the population is more than doubled. The population is 200 million plus, we say. We don't know, we say. But forget all the zeros and trillions we call. Divide it, it will come back hovering around the same 25 billion. So we've not grown. This is, and don't take my word for it. Check it out.
I will. I definitely will.
Shagari spent an average of 25 billion a year between 79 and 83. Check out the population, it was under 100 million at the time. 43 years later, we're still spending the same amount. The population is more than doubled.
That's what
this is all the subsidy. This is the pain. This is what you get from all the subsidy in education. You want to be egalitarian, so everyone should be educated. I support it, right?
The conversation continues right after this break.
News Central TV, Africa's #1 storyteller, has come with the best of both worlds. With a combination of news app and live TV, we ensure that you keep track of the latest headlines, breaking news, and in-depth analysis from professional journalists from around the continent. Download the News Central TV app on Android and iOS and get started today. Don't forget to follow us on News Central's social media platforms. News Central, Africa First.
Thanks for staying with us. I still have two-term governor of Cross River State in southern Nigeria, His Excellency Donald Duke. Thank you for staying with us, sir.
Thank you.
So we have a lot to really catch up on, to talk about the new administration. But before we talk about the task ahead, I'd like you to give an honest assessment of the Buhari's administration. He was at the helm of affairs for this period of time. His aides are saying that Nigerians are going to miss him in no distant time. So what's your assessment of his administration and what he has left for this new administration to pick up on?
Well, assessments are always subjective. So this is Donald's assessment. It's not a national or generally accepted thing. I think our country could have done a lot better from where we were in 1960 to today. I also think that we have the personnel to take us to where we ought to be. I think that Buhari was too provincial to be the president of a diverse nation as Nigeria. You see, learning is dynamic. You don't stop. I think he had not progressed from where he left Nigeria in 1983 or 86, right? I think, or 85 somewhere, to where he came on board again. So you could see similarities in policies at that time. I think we could have done a lot better than we did. Even members of his administration, if you speak to them honestly, they'll tell you the same, right? You also heard the outburst from his wife, right? I think there was a latent frustration there. She felt we could be doing better than we're doing today. So we have had a lot of locust years, that we have not really made any progress. We lost 3 years during the Civil War. After the Civil War, there was an oil boom, so we grew, but we didn't take the decisions we ought to have taken. So we have gone successively from one administration or the other, not being bold enough to do what it ought to do.
Okay, let's take it from the 3 tripod he came on. He talked about security, anti-corruption, and the economy. If you were to assess him on those 3 levels, what would be your result?
I think the corruption is more endemic, right? If you look at how much was spent over the period and how much was achieved, I don't think he achieved much in terms of that. Corruption has been really further institutionalized. The intimidation of the judiciary also didn't help, but that's another story. And when it comes to security, there's still places in this country I dare not go. You know that, we all know that. So we had 8 years of banditry, which was initially cocooned in the Northeast, become a national thing. It went from the Northeast to the Northwest to the North Central, right? He couldn't really contain what happened in the Southeast till today. Some parts of the Southeast, Mondays or some days are no work days. It just shows that he was not in charge of certain parts of the country. I wouldn't give him credit for results. Maybe I'll give him credit for effort, but not for results.
Okay, let's talk specifically of his energy policy, because
we're still
looking at the.
Was there any energy policy?
Specifically, he talked about the moribund refineries. The plan is to revamp them. For Kaduna, the target is 2024, but the one for Warri, the plan was to get it operational by December. That's in a few months. This year. So considering everything that you know of his policies and what he's done now that we have a new administration, do you see these refineries coming upstream and helping to manage this crisis that we see ourselves in?
He had 8 years to fix refineries, even if he did one every 2 years, right? And like I said to you earlier, the infrastructure was already there, so it's just equipments and all that. He can't take credit for what he never did. Saying that you're going to revamp the refineries is almost like an afterthought, right? You haven't revamped your refinery, you're investing in a private refinery, you're buying refined products from Niger Republic. Come on. But let's look into the future. Here's the past.
He is the past. But before we jump to the future, you learn lessons from what happened in the past to move to the future. So let's talk about, still staying with the energy sector, your area of expertise, Niger Delta. You are from the Niger Delta.
Yeah.
Ogoni land.
Yeah.
There's been a whole lot of talk about its cleanup. If my memory serves me right, Shibanjo, the former vice president, flagged it off in 2016. They had, let's say, 7 years, if not 8 years, to do something about the cleanup. Why do you think it's taking so long to clean up the Ogoni land? Just a few days ago, 129 billion was approved for the continuation of the exercise.
I mentioned earlier how corruption has been institutionalized, okay? Now, you're asking me about the Niger Delta. I'll say some things that are not very popular, but have to be said. Everything in the Niger Delta is seen as job for the boys. That's how everything is seen. So you have an NDDC, which is a totally useless institution. You don't need it. The states in the Niger Delta get derivation. Derivation is compensation, right, for letting go of your resource for national use. So you give them 13%. You can argue on the amount, 13, 20, whatever, but that is done already. Then you set up an NDDC that does similar things, doing the same roads, doing this and doing that, and they're now in debt to the tune of 2-3 trillion and have nothing to show for it. Then you now set up a superstructure called the Niger Delta Ministry. Why? Because you have oil. So if you find oil now in the Northeast, are you going to set up a superstructure like that? Right? And so when you go for a cleanup of Ogoni, first of all, the locals feel that whether they have the expertise or not, oh, this is for us. It's our cleanup. Don't come and clean up my house. Okay? And so there's brigandage. They just literally steal the money and nothing to show for it. That is the Niger Delta for you. For the amount of money that has been spent in the Niger Delta as a region and the results to show, there's a huge disparity, huge disparity.
So what needs to be done? Because we keep talking about, the Ogoni land is just one part of the
It can be
Niger
replicated
Delta.
in so many places.
Okay, so do you think there's a better way for them to go about the cleanup that could have made it a little quicker?
Well, hold the oil companies responsible, right? They muddied it up. It's not the government that should clean it up. They should clean it up, right? They have the expertise. They know what to do. You want to tell me that Shell, or I think it was Shell that was operating there, Shell has the expertise. They know who to call to clean it up. Not the contract for the boys. The government had nothing to do with it. You see, we need to stay off this industry and let it run like any other industry, right? And get the taxes that you get. But everyone is there. The president sees himself as Minister of Petroleum and this and that. That is, if a president wants to be Minister of anything, he should go to national planning, not petroleum. You could see that it's so cheap and so it's so infantile. Why do you want to be Minister of Petroleum? Why not take power? Why not go to national planning? That gives you an oversight over everything, okay? But if Shell muddied Ogoni land, Shell go clean it up. Now, what would it cost? Shell is a JV between Shell and NNPC. They'll contribute the monies that are required, but Shell take the lead. It's like the refineries. The refineries ran down because we couldn't run it, but we should have outsourced the management of the refineries. We don't even need to own it. We should have sold it long ago.
Can that still happen now? Do you
With
think
the refineries that don't work, you've got to fix it. You've got to bring it back to life before you outsource it. But why do you want to own it? Bring it back to life, put it on the stock market and sell it.
Okay, let's move a little away from the energy sector and talk of the strides that we noticed at the twilight of this administration. I mean, the previous administration.
You're really fixed on this guy, aren't you?
No, really, but we need to get
you want to get a good perspective of where we're coming from. I understand.
And I also need to hear your thoughts because I don't think we explore minds like yours enough. So this is an opportunity I wouldn't want to miss. So let's look at the emergence or the rebirth of a national carrier, for instance, the Nigeria.
But you and I know that's a joke. You and I know that's a joke.
How is it a joke? Because there was a demonstration flight the other day.
First of all, it's more than that. I mean, look, we have Aero, we have Air Peace. You don't bring one aircraft and say you have started a national carrier. That's a joke. That's an insult to the intelligence of over 200 million people. Then who owns it? It's even a leased airline from Ethiopian Airlines, aircraft from Ethiopian Airlines. Who owns majority of Air Nigeria? The Nigeria Air, Ethiopian Airlines. So that's not the way to go.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say something contrary, that it's indeed a laudable idea.
Yeah, done in a very shoddy manner. You don't do that.
So you also have a problem with wet leasing. Some people say that's how airlines like Virgin
I don't have
Air
a
and
problem with
Emirates.
wet leasing.
Okay,
I have
so
a problem with launching an airline with one aircraft on the eve of your departure, right? Without any institutional structure. First of all, you have a lot of airlines, local airlines that are moribund in Nigeria. ARIC belongs to the government now. Aero belongs to the government now. If you want to go international, you see, for us international, if you're not going to London, America, you're not international. Let's start with the West African sub-region. There's a lot of linkages there that we can take advantage of. And we have the aircrafts on ground already, right? And grow, incrementally from there. Not bring one aircraft and you want to go to India, tomorrow you want to go to London, the next day you want to go to New York. That's not it. It takes a while to put this together because the institution has to grow. To run an international carrier like we had Nigeria Airways, it didn't happen overnight. It took a while to build up, okay? So my thinking is whether you wet lease, I don't have a problem with, with all that. Just that's a function of the economics, whether wet leasing and the traffic can get you to a sustainable.
We've had a lot of social media experts talk
about.
Yeah,
but social media, you have everything. So you look at the economics, but you have to also look at the structure of the airline. You put together a proper structure and let it work. Like I said, we have enough aircrafts in the country that could make this happen, but we didn't take advantage of that. We went to the fanfare and then the structure of the whole thing. Yes, we have a problem in running airlines. I don't believe Nigeria should own an airline as a government, but I think there should be a national carrier owned largely by Nigerians on the stock market, professionally run. The folks who run Emirates, right, they're professionals. They're not Emirates. They're not. In fact, the last chief executive of Emirates Airline was a former BA CEO or executive. That's what it's done. You get people who can run it because it's so technical today, you just don't put anybody there. But I think it was launched and that was the end of it. It's not going to go anywhere. I don't think so.
All right, I think this is a good spot for us to take another short break. And when we come back, I'll be asking questions about Cross River State, and maybe we'll still go back to the previous administration, or I will look forward to what happens with the Tinubu's administration. Do stay with us.
Africa is rising. Again, we hear our sounds echo on the other side. Afrobeat and Afropop reinvented, hip life brought back to life, new energy infused into Kwaito and Kwela. Africa is balling. Every stroke, every shot, every raise, we find our place at the top. Taking the helm of real power, new hopes for democracies. A breed of entrepreneurial tigers, audacious storytellers, and a promising generation raring to go. Truly, Africa is rising. And this is where the stories that define our continent live.
Thank you for staying with us. Your Excellency, a lot of persons says the government hit the ground running. That's a popular phrase in Nigeria. But looking at our past experience with how long it took for the cabinet to be set up, do you see that Tinubu will have his team announced in the coming days? How soon do you expect to see
Well,
that?
there's a law now that says you've got to announce your team within 60 days of administration. So that's taking care of that. And that's another thing. Now you're dragging me back to Buhari. The man just wasn't ready for governance. For over 6 months, he had no cabinet.
You're optimistic that we'll not see a replay of
You
that
can't,
experience?
because the law now says within 60 days you must. There was an amendment. Within 60 days you must announce your cabinet.
Let's talk about the man himself, President Tinubu. There's been a lot of concern about his health. There's been videos of him on social media, either stumbling or being assisted to sign papers. So You seem to believe that his government will do quite a bit, but the man himself, how concerned are you about the comments and the videos that you see when it looks like he's not as stable, so to speak?
Can I give you lifelong advice?
Please do.
Ignore social media.
But is it possible to do that?
It can be so manipulated, right?
But you saw the inauguration video, actually. I don't know if you watched it.
I did. I watched it.
There were concerns about him stumbling forward. And throughout his campaign...
I stumble. I'm sure you stumble from time. I think you stumbled not too long ago.
Are you being diplomatic now?
No, I'm
or
not.
You're just,
I'm not.
But are you concerned about this? The talk that has,
I don't think you can do a national campaign if you're in poor health, honestly. Now, don't forget that President Yar'Adua had to abort his campaign at one stage to go look after himself. A national campaign is tough. This guy went through a national campaign. Look, we're not as young as we were in 99. I was 37 in 99. He was maybe in his late 40s or, So, yes, the things we did we couldn't do. Things we did, we can't do them today. But I think his health issue is exaggerated. I cannot say anything clinical, I don't know. But I have a deep distrust for the social media.
Okay, let's talk about his trips abroad. We had a similar experience with the Buhari administration where the president goes out of the country to take care of his health. What are your sentiments, so let me use that word, going forward, that this administration, he has set a precedent already. We hear he went abroad to take care of his health so he can be ready to take on the task of governance. Do you see this trend?
What I heard was different. When he had a knee surgery, he went public with it.
Did he do it here in Nigeria?
No, he did not.
So that's my question, because one of the things that they campaign on...
When after the elections, he went abroad for a while, he said he wanted to be devoid of all the hangers-on so he could put together his administration. I want to believe that's why he went. I'm in no position to comment on his health. But I think also we should internalize our medical facilities, healthcare. Buhari spent a great deal of time out of the country. On the eve of his departure, he set up he commissioned a state-of-the-art facility at the villa and made a very sad statement that this was to take care of the elites and the VIPs, as if they're more entitled. You see that, that was a very sad statement for someone who rode on the crest of egalitarianism to make. Oh, I've built this wonderful facility to take care of our VIPs so they won't go abroad.
So you are the one that's been saying that I seem to be staying on Buhari. So
well, you've taken me back there.
So I'm looking at your projection. He seems to be setting some sort of precedence.
Well,
really.
Like I said, Buhari at the eve of his departure set up a hospital. So I hope the incoming leaders, not just President Tinubu, but future leaders will find no need to go seek medical attention abroad.
Well,
it's a security problem.
I'll probably be childish and just say, okay, pink is crossed.
Look,
really.
let me tell you something. President Yeltsin of Russia at the time had a heart problem. He had a bypass. What did he do? The experts were in America. But what they did was they brought those experts to Moscow, right? And supervised Russian doctors to do the work. That's a national pride. You don't take your leader. This is not 1960. This is 2023.
You have so much. You did amazing work in Cross River State. If you get an invitation from this administration now to come on board and help them revamp the country, so to speak, would you accept?
Of course. I think it's so unpatriotic to hold back a gift that you have and not make it available to the generality of people. A point comes where, yes, I'm not APC, I didn't campaign for the president, But if he finds me worthy, and it must be something that I feel I could give value, not just anything. It must be something I know that I have the passion to and I can give value. Otherwise, please go get someone else who has passion for that. So for instance, you asked me to come and be Minister of Sports.
Yes, certainly not. I'm sure nobody
That's not my passion.
Yes.
So I wouldn't give my best, you know. So it's on the need to provide the best. But it'll be certainly very unpatriotic to hold back when you can give.
Okay, let's move a little away and look at keeping this new administration on its toes and ensuring that they stay on track with the promises that they've made. I'm talking about opposition. You are in the PDP. How do you see them acting in the coming days as, you know, a viable opposition to keep this administration on its toes and ensure that it does what it says it would?
There's hardly a Labour Party. You have a Peter Obi, who was a phenomenon of this election, but it doesn't have the Labour Party itself, which is just a platform. He could have run as an independent candidate and gotten the same traction, right? The Labour Party doesn't have that buoyancy to be an opposition party. The PDP does. And going forward, the opposition have to go into some conversation, right? Because they all have their roots in the PDP, okay? And the disagreement basically was the issue of where the president will come from. Some of us felt it should come from the South, having 8 years of a Northern president. Peter was also of that vein, and he felt that he couldn't have made it on the platform of the PDP. So he opted to go on a Labour Party. I don't think he thought he would go this far. But again, we all underestimated the hunger for good governance. So some people wanted something different. But to be an effective opposition party, the Labour, as it is presently constituted, does not provide that. To be an opposition party, you must be everywhere in the country. So it's not just opposing the national government, you must oppose even the local government, the state governments. They're not there.
Do you believe that the PDP is up to the task of?
Well, PDP has to go back to the drawing board and redefine itself. See, 8 years out of office for the PDP was quite traumatic for them. They birthed this republic, and so for 16 years they were there. If you look at the structure, or look at APC, it's made up mainly of former PDP people. So they have to go back, look at themselves, and if another 4 years or 8 years, PDP will be extinct. In fact, PDP owes its current existence to Ezewuike. Without him, the party would have gone. So they have to go back and redefine themselves and going to ask themselves, they can't go it alone now. A lot of water is passed under the bridge. And then you've got to accommodate a new brigade of young people who want to participate in politics, but they're very idealistic. They don't want to be seen to be with these people or that people, but reality has to set in. Politics is a game of idealism and reality. So how Peter on one hand, as leader of the Labour Party, and the PDP, and even Kwankwaso, if they're able to bring him on board, you know, is a challenge that they have to face. Otherwise, they're not going to provide effective opposition. My reading of the politics, after the judicial process, there's going to be a lot of migration. And you migrate from what you don't have to what you want. So it's been one direction. So
quite unfortunate, the politics in this country.
It is.
Okay, let's come home. This conversation will be incomplete if I don't talk to you about what's happening in Cross River State. During the electioneering campaign, a couple of issues came up. I'll just mention some of them because, I mean, you invested heavily in that state. You have a stake. It's your home. During the campaigning period, you referred to the former governor, Ben Ayade, as cowardly and expressed worry over the task ahead for a new government, any government. You actually felt at the time, from what we've seen of your campaign, that your party's candidate was a better option for the job. But your party lost for the first time since 1999. What's your worry now?
You see, and I'll be as blunt as I usually am when it comes to issues of Cross River, because I'm emotionally engaged in that. We handed over governance unwittingly to someone who truly does not understand the state, okay? In '99, we came on board with a lot of ideals. It was a fresh slate. And we looked at our strengths, our weaknesses, and we found that's when we talked about tourism and this and that. We're not a major oil producing state, although that is still a subject for discussion. But we felt that if we could, what could we do that would harness the vast majority of our people within a short time? Tourism offers that. And we were doing pretty well for 8 years. Unfortunately, when I handed over, the gentleman who took over, Mr. Ezewuike, he dropped the ball for reasons best known to him. Then further dropped the ball because he single-handedly brought Ayede on board. Ben is, as a person, is quite a lovely guy, but totally disconnected from the realities of Cross River State. So while I would say Lale had a plethora of uncompleted projects, Ben has even more. All these fancy factories and all that are not working. But one thing we miss in politics is that governance is a continuance. We, the governors or the administration, are just shift workers. We do a 4-8 year shift and we hand over to the next shift. If the next shift has to start from the beginning, you'll never complete the building. And that's the problem with Nigeria, and more so in Cross River State. If we celebrate anything about Lagos, it's because there's some semblance of continuity. But in Cross River, we invested heavily in tourism. We invested heavily in bringing traffic to the state. That's what tourism is all about, traffic. We are at the end of Nigeria. In fact, we're at the end of West Africa. After Cross River, you go into Cameroon. How do we get people to go there? We're not Benin. In Benin is a transit point, or Kaduna. You don't go to Calabar except you want to go there. So what can we do to attract you to come to Calabar? And that's why we did all the carnivals, the this, the that, and all that. I made it a peaceful place, a place you want to visit. We should have continued along those lines. It doesn't preclude a governor from doing his own thing, but don't stop something in order to do your own thing, because it's continual. That's what happened in Cross River between 07 and 15, and more so between 15 and 23. Ayede completely derailed. We lost all those things. We had Tinapa, which was in partnership with Walmart.
We definitely will be talking specifically about okay. Tinapa, but I just wanted to get a sense of your worries now. Even
things are so bad. It will take a superhuman effort to bring it back to where it was.
What's the level of possibility now with the
administration? I don't know. I know the governor, the current administration, is very well intentioned, but it's more than intention. He's got to put together a great team. The state is heavily indebted. He has to build confidence not only amongst the citizens of the state, but also amongst the institutions that can provide the support. These are things I enjoyed. I earned, and it's not an award, I earned the support, right, and confidence of the citizens of the state, and largely earned the support and confidence of institutions, of banks and all that. When people look at Tinapa, for instance, they think it's Cross River State. There's hardly any bank in Nigeria that has no investment in Tinapa. At that time, at least to a tune of $1 million, because at that time, $1 million was just about 180 or 190 million naira. The list they have is 250. River State government, for instance, has more equity in Tinapa than Cross River State.
But why is it being now described as a fraud? During the previous election, a prominent senator, I think, Florence Itagiwa, in trying to sell her candidate at the time, described Tinapa as a fraud. So what happened really?
Go back to the tape where the commissioning of Tinapa was done and ask who danced most at that. It was Florence. Florence is politics. I don't want to say anything about her, but yeah, it was just purely politics.
So what happened?
You say the things that you think would please the new administration, but everybody was behind because it was not a flight in fancy. If it was a flight in fancy, I would have started Tinapa in my first term. Part of the drawbacks is it was completed at the end of my administration because it was going to be a very large investment and we needed to get everybody on board. And that took a while, okay? What happened was that, selfishly and childishly, we see ourselves as the night, the sun and the moon. So governors will say, oh, this is a Donald Duke project, I'm not going to touch it, right? And abandon it. I don't have a dime in Tinapa.
I watched a video that was shot in 2021 of Tinapa, and it's almost like a ghost town.
It is not it is a ghost town.
So one of the arguments that keep popping up in the course of my reading is the fact that maybe, like you said, it's more like a one-man project. Other people wanted something that they will shine with. In retrospect, is there something probably you could have put in place to ensure the continuity of Tinapa? Because that is one project that even the person that shot the video was literally crying. And let me just add this quickly. One of the arguments was that the idea of Tinapa was to make it a free trade area as well, and that it's not a state that can give that. You have to liaise with the federal government. Was all of these done? And again, to the last part of the question, in retrospect, is there something you could have done to keep Tinapa alive?
Two things. It's a free zone. So it's not that it wasn't a free zone. It was gazetted. No, it was passed. Look, don't forget the federal government gave Cross River State a guarantee. So if it was a flight in fancy, the federal government won't give you a guarantee on a project that can't pay back. Could we have done something different? I hope we had finished earlier, maybe a year earlier, because it was meant to go on the stock market. At that time, the stock market was booming. So take it out of the ambit of Cross River State, and take it out of the ambit of politics. That's why I think what we could have done. But, it didn't occur to us at the time because the administration coming in was supposed to be a brotherly administration. So you wouldn't think about, I remember going to President Obasanjo and saying, the Gazette, can we get this whole thing gazetted, there's certain things, if you can buy goods up to $500,000 in Tinapa, duty free and all that. And he said, yeah, we're looking at it, but it's at the end of the administration, so we have so many things to try and tidy up. But why are you so worried? Umaru is supporting you, that's Yaradua, and Lil is coming in as governor, right? But Lil didn't say that way, apparently. He just wasn't interested.
One more question on Tinapa before we move on. The name Obudu keeps coming up. What role did she play in the unfortunate reality of Tinapa?
She was limited to the studio. Tinapa was a totally complete resort. It had casinos, it had provision for casinos, for movie cinemas, for movie making, for shopping experience, and it also had an amusement park. Now, she was involved with the studio and launched Ebony Life on the back of that, okay? The studio wasn't designed for television programming. It was designed for actual filmmaking. We made a film there, Half of a Yellow Sun, which had some international participation.
Tilab was something, I've forgotten the name now. Yes, I know some of them.
Chiwetel.
Yes.
was there. Amber Rose was also there. And there were quite big names that came in. And they testified, for instance, that the studio was even more sophisticated than Pinewood Studios, where James Bond is made. But so she took a part of it, but it wasn't meant for that. And the state government invested, I'm told, $2 billion to support her enterprise. Unfortunately, when she left, I'm told she went with a lot of equipment from Tinapa Studios to her Lagos facility. And when was approached, said she'll return it, but she just wanted to keep it in Lagos for safekeeping. That doesn't sound right to me, but.
Okay, let's wind down and look at, you've been a two-time governor. You've made efforts to become the president of this country, and politics came in. What are some of the things that, in retrospect, that you've learned that you would want to share freely with this administration or leaders that are on their way up or are there already, so that they don't make those mistakes and maybe be better off?
It's very difficult when you're dealing with human beings, because politics actually, as drudgery as it may be, it's an incredible school where you learn human nature. So in politics, and you have to hide your intelligence, right? If you're smart,
that's a first. Hide your intelligence in politics,
because particularly if you're not on top. When you're on top, you can show it. But when you're an underling, don't appear too smart, because you threaten people, right? And when people on top in politics have huge egos, and when they feel threatened by you, right, they try to either eliminate you, and I'm not talking about elimination by life, but just get away with you and all that. Or you hear them saying, oh, he's too arrogant, he's this, he's that, and all that. That's one of the things you've got to learn about politics. It's a great school. You learn modesty, right? What could I have done differently? Folks say to me, a chap walked up to me and said, you're the problem with Cross River State. And I said, how? He said, you brought Ayade. I said, no, I didn't bring Ayade. He said, but you brought the man that brought Ayade. I didn't bring Leo. I mean, it was just assumed that after my administration, he would take over, because it was such a synergic administration. So we knew who the next successor would be and all that. And nobody had a better resume for governance than Neil, perhaps even better than mine. I was Commissioner of Finance at the age of 30. He was a senator at the age of 30. We're 3 months apart. He was special advisor to the president at the age of 38. I was governor. He was minister in the largest ministry, Power, at the age of 41, right? So by the time at 45, he became governor of Cross River, when I was leaving. The point is, if you have someone with that kind of resume and you don't hand over to him, and you hand over to someone else, and that person gets it wrong, people are going to turn around and say, oh, you had someone like him, but you didn't do that, So you never know the state of a person or the character of a person, because politics actually brings out your character, right? Or leadership or authority brings out your character until that happens. You talked about Florence Itagewa here. Florence could have easily been my ADC when I was governor. She was all over the place with me. But the moment you leave office, you're jettisoned and the next person is a new kid. That's how it is. And you learn a lot, because for me, life is a school. So you learn these things, you learn human beings. And I tell people, if you want to take a crash course in life, go join politics. What you will learn in 4 years could take you an eternity, and you haven't studied it yet.
I think that's a good place to leave it. So much to talk about, but we have to stop. Thank you so much for speaking with us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And there you have it. I hope you picked a thing or two. I know I did. I'm going to do a lot more reading than I've done before. Thank you for giving us your time. I'll see you again. My name is Felicity Ezewuike.